Morning arrives like a careful hand drawing back curtains, and the archive breathes with the quiet sounds that Elena Vasquez knows by heart. Climate control humming its steady song, the distant flutter of the Republic's flag on the veranda, the soft tick of the regulator clock marking time in a world that has learned patience. Dust lifts in gentle spirals through filtered light, falling in warm rectangles across the long oak table where the brass seal of the new California Republic sits embedded, worn smooth by years of careful fingers. Elena begins her rituals with the devotion of someone who understands that order creates safety. She trims the lantern's wick, though morning light already fills the room, wiping the glass with folded cloth until it gleams. The ledger ribbon straightens beneath her touch, sliding into place like a bookmark that respects the page. Index cards align themselves in neat rows, their corners forming a calm horizon across the wooden surface. A graphite pencil receives its daily sharpening, not to a point that might tear paper, but to a softness that leaves generous marks. 4 artifacts wait on the scarred table, each carrying its own quiet gravity. The faded speech draft bears the penciled title, Glimpse of Glory, its margins filled with careful revisions in handwriting she recognizes as belonging to former regional administrator Catherine Torres. The paper feels soft with age, edges worn smooth by handling, suggesting this document has passed through many thoughtful readers before finding sanctuary in her archive. Beside it rests a fabric flag, a regional variation of the Republic's standard, folded within protective tissue. Where a small star once adorned the field, there is only a clean absence. The star itself preserved separately in a glassine sleeve, labeled in delicate script. The precision of its removal speaks to reverence rather than rebellion, conservation rather than destruction. The water allocation ledger draws her attention most persistently. Bound in standard brown leather, its pages chronicle 18 months of resource distribution across the region. Settlement after settlement receives its careful notation. Vault City, 847 gallons weekly. Reading, 1,203 gallons with mining adjustments. Modoc, 425 gallons plus agricultural supplements. But scattered throughout, a recurring penciled notation appears in the margins. 2%, written in the same careful script, appearing beside roughly 1 entry in 4, with no apparent pattern. The final piece, a ranger's journal filled with square handwriting that carries the measured cadence of footsteps taken at dawn. Patrol notes rarely tell stories directly, yet they imply them in their careful economy of language. Each entry documents not just observations, but a subtle evolution in responsibilities. Communities taking on tasks that once required external oversight. From the corner, a radio whispers at low volume, carrying morning check-ins from settlements across the region. Elena recognizes the voices. Marcus from Good Springs, Sarah from Prim, Rebecca from Nipton, their words carrying the comfortable rhythm of people who have performed these tasks for years. But something in the cadence has shifted. Conversations becoming more collaborative, reports transforming into neighborly updates. Morning archive. This is Good Springs Station. Marcus's voice carries through gentle static. All quiet here. Overnight conditions normal. Caravan routes clear. We're running about 2% above projected usage this quarter. Community has been careful with conservation measures. 2%. Elena's pencil hovers over her morning log as understanding begins to dawn. She reaches for the water ledger with fresh perspective, scanning the familiar entries with new eyes. The penciled notations don't mark shortfalls or surpluses. They mark communities consistently maintaining small reserves above projected needs, demonstrating the careful resource management that indicates readiness for increased autonomy. The speech draft catches lamplight as she opens it, Catherine Torres's careful cursive becoming clearer as Elena reads with growing comprehension. Glory, I've come to believe, is not found in conquest or expansion, but in the careful tending of systems that allow people to flourish without constant oversight, the draft explains in measured phrases. We catch glimpses of this glory in morning reports from settlements that have learned to manage their own resources, in the quiet competence of people who understand that true strength comes from networks of mutual support. The margins contain notes in different hands, suggesting this draft circulated among the regional administrators' inner circle. One notation, in the same script that marked the ledger's entries, reads, "Communities that maintain reserves show capacity for self-governance. Trust builds strength." Elena sets the document aside and returns to the ledger, flipping through pages with new understanding. Settlements marked with 2% correlate with communities that have recently requested enhanced self-governance status, territories asking to manage their own resource distribution while maintaining trade and communication ties with the broader Republic network. The penciled notations serve as quiet indicators of readiness for the next phase of development. The removed star from the flag takes on new meaning within this context. Not a symbol of abandonment, but of ceremonial transition, communities choosing to honor their connection to Republic values while stepping into greater self-determination. The careful preservation of both flag and star suggests respect for both past partnership and future autonomy. Outside, Shady Sands awakens to another day with the familiar sounds of a functioning community. Footsteps pass in corridors, voices carry the cadence of people beginning daily routines. The Republic continues its patient work, but Elena begins to understand that the nature of that work is evolving in ways most citizens haven't yet recognized. She reaches for her morning tea, cooled to perfect drinking temperature, and settles back to consider the implications. The archive around her contains thousands of documents chronicling the Republic's growth from small coalition to major regional power. But these artifacts suggest a new chapter beginning, one that might redefine what the Republic means and how it functions. The radio crackles with another check-in from a settlement Elena knows has recently achieved enhanced self-governance status. Their report includes the same casual mention of reserves running above projected need. The same tone of quiet competence she's beginning to recognize as characteristic of communities that have learned effective self-management. As Elena prepares for her daily archival work, she takes out her pencil and draws a soft circle around the phrase "glimpse of glory" in the speech draft's margin. Then, turning to the ledger, she circles the number 2 in one of the reserve entries. 2 circles, 2 quiet mysteries that connect in ways she's only beginning to understand, patterns that speak of institutional evolution rather than crisis. The morning stretches ahead with familiar rhythms of document review and correspondence, but today Elena carries new questions. The brass lamp burns steadily, its flame constant in the archive's controlled environment, while outside the desert continues its ancient cycle of light and shadow. In this quiet space between past and future, Elena begins tracing threads of a story that may redefine everything she thought she knew about the Republic's trajectory, where apparent endings reveal themselves as careful beginnings, and the Republic's story continues in voices both familiar and transformed. The morning light that first touched Elena's archive now travels further across the former territories, finding its way through tall windows into a sun-dappled workshop where precision and patience converge. Here, Marcus Chen tends his cartographer's table with the same quiet devotion Elena brings to her documents, his hands moving across large sheets of paper with the measured grace of someone who understands that accuracy serves travelers better than speed serves map-makers. The workshop breathes with the gentle sounds of careful work. The whisper of compass, points tracing arcs, the soft scrape of eraser removing outdated boundaries, the barely audible scratch of graphite marking new agreements between communities. Elena arrives as Marcus completes his morning ritual of tool preparation, her leather satchel containing copies of the documents that sparked her curiosity about recurring patterns and quiet transformations. The workshop smells of paper and ink, leather bindings, and the faint metallic scent of drafting instruments maintained with religious care. Marcus looks up from his work with the patient smile of someone accustomed to visitors seeking geographic clarity, his hands continuing their gentle movements across the map spread before him like a meditation made visible. Archivist Vasquez, he greets her with genuine warmth, gesturing toward the large drafting table where familiar NCR boundaries appear in various stages of revision. I wondered when our paths might cross. The territorial adjustments have been keeping me occupied these past months. His workspace reflects the same careful organization Elena maintains in her archive. Compass sets gleaming with daily maintenance, rulers worn smooth by constant use, colored pencils arranged in spectrum order, and a ceramic inkwell, clearly pre-war manufacture, that catches morning light like a small beacon of continuity. The map itself tells a layered story that complements Elena's documentary discoveries. Traditional administrative boundaries appear in faded blue ink, their lines representing the territorial controls she knows from standard references. But overlaying these older demarcations, Marcus has drawn new boundaries in various colors. Green lines marking cooperative resource zones, red lines indicating enhanced autonomy regions, and yellow boundaries showing transitional governance areas. The effect creates a palimpsest of institutional evolution, each layer revealing how communities have grown into their own strength while maintaining beneficial connections. Elena opens her satchel and produces the water allocation ledger, showing Marcus the recurring 2% notations that have puzzled her morning contemplation. His response carries the satisfaction of someone whose work connects with larger patterns he's been quietly documenting. Those communities have demonstrated consistent resource management above projected needs, he confirms, his finger tracing one of the green cooperative zones. The cartographic adjustments reflect their readiness for enhanced self-governance. When settlements maintain reserves while meeting all their obligations, they've proven capacity for increased responsibility. As Marcus speaks, he continues his drafting work with meditative precision, updating communication frequencies and trade route notations along the map's margins. Each change reflects communities that have learned to coordinate their own logistics while maintaining connections to broader regional networks. The ceramic inkwell catches shifting light as he notes a new cooperative agreement between 3 settlements, Oakhaven, Whisper Creek, and Crossroads, their combined territory, larger than some of the Republic's original holdings, managed entirely through consensus and shared resources. The most interesting development, Marcus continues, his voice carrying the same measured cadence as his pencil strokes, is how these boundary adjustments actually strengthen regional stability. Communities governing themselves according to their actual resource needs and cultural preferences require less external intervention. The Republic's role evolves from direct administration to coordination and support, allowing our personnel to focus on truly essential services. Elena studies the map more carefully, noting how new boundaries often follow natural geographic features. Watershed lines, mountain ridges, desert regions with similar climate patterns. The settlements requesting enhanced autonomy cluster in areas with established resource networks and proven governance traditions. The pattern suggests careful planning rather than random political change, institutional metamorphosis rather than institutional collapse. Marcus retrieves correspondence from settlement representatives requesting boundary modifications, letters that carry the thoughtful tone of people who have considered their requests carefully. They explain how proposed changes would improve resource management, enhance inter-community cooperation, and reduce administrative complexity. None expressed dissatisfaction with Republic governance. Instead, They demonstrate confidence in local capacity and desire for increased responsibility. The phrase, "glimpse of glory," appears throughout this correspondence. Elena observes, pointing to a letter from a settlement consortium. They seem to use it as shorthand for cooperative achievement. Marcus nods with recognition, his pencil pausing over a notation about shared patrol schedules. It's become common language in these communications. Communities speak of catching glimpses of glory when they successfully coordinate water-sharing agreements, when their joint security patrols prevent conflicts before escalation, when their cooperative schools produce students ready for regional responsibilities. The phrase captures something about shared accomplishment that individual achievement doesn't encompass. The morning progresses as Marcus demonstrates his revision process, showing Elena how territorial adjustments require verification from multiple sources. Resource surveys, confirming sustainable boundaries. Communication tests ensuring reliable contact maintenance. Trade route analysis, guaranteeing continued economic viability. Each new line represents weeks of consultation with affected communities, ensuring changes serve practical needs rather than political preferences. Elena examines the frequency notations Marcus updates along trade routes, noting how many correspond to settlements marked with 2% in her ledger. The pattern reinforces her growing understanding that the Republic's apparent territorial changes represent sophisticated adaptation to post-war realities. Communities achieving self-reliance while maintaining beneficial connections to larger networks. As the workshop's climate control system cycles quietly in the background, Marcus completes his morning updates and begins organizing materials for afternoon consultations. His movements carry the calm efficiency of someone whose work serves both travelers and administrators, ensuring maps reflect actual conditions rather than administrative preferences. The most satisfying aspect of this work, Marcus reflects as he caps his pens and aligns his tools with practiced precision, is seeing how communities grow stronger when their governance boundaries match their practical needs. The Republic's strength has always come from cooperation rather than control, and these adjustments allow that cooperation to function more naturally. Elena prepares to continue her investigation, her understanding deepened by seeing Elena's documentary patterns translated into geographic reality. The radio frequencies Marcus updates will carry her to the communication networks that connect these evolving communities across the vast Californian landscape, following threads of conversation that reveal how institutional change can honor both practical needs and deeper values. As she secures her satchel and prepares to leave the sun-dappled workshop, the ceramic inkwell continues catching light, a small beacon of continuity in a world learning new ways to organize itself around ancient principles of mutual aid and shared responsibility. The frequencies Marcus updated carry Elena westward as evening settles across the former territories, following invisible threads of communication to a hilltop relay station where patient technology serves patient voices. The building sits modest against deepening sky, its antenna array reaching toward distant settlements like metal trees grown from careful engineering. Inside the climate-controlled environment, communications specialist Rebecca Santos conducts her evening radio sweep with the practiced attention of someone whose ears have learned to distinguish routine from revolution, disguised as routine. Elena arrives as Rebecca begins her shift, timing coordinated through the same networks she's investigating. The radio room envelops them in soft electronic hum, banks of equipment casting gentle amber light across logbooks filled with careful notations. Rebecca's workspace reflects the methodical organization Elena recognizes from her archive and Marcus's workshop. Frequency charts updated daily, transmission logs bound chronologically, and a ceramic coffee mug that matches Marcus's inkwell in its quiet testimony to continuity across decades of change. Evening archivist, Rebecca greets while adjusting headphone positioning and checking signal strength indicators. Marcus mentioned you're documenting patterns in our territorial transitions. The evening frequencies tell their own version of that story. Her voice carries calm confidence earned through years of listening to communities learn their own voices, distinguishing between formal reports and neighborly conversations that reveal how people actually relate to one another. Rebecca begins her sweep with meditative precision, testing backup power, calibrating antenna orientation, resetting equipment with movements worn smooth by repetition. She breathes with a console, inhaling with a hum, exhaling with a gentle click of channels settling open. The ritual creates space for voices to arrive like familiar footsteps on familiar porches. Goodspring Station to Regional Relay, evening check. Arrives the first transmission, Marcus's voice carrying through clear reception. All conditions nominal. Consolidated patrol schedule confirmed with Prim. Water Committee reports surplus maintained at 2% above projection. Community workshops continue Wednesdays. Signing off with a glimpse of glory. Rebecca writes with practiced efficiency. GSPR EVE 2% plus or minus WEDWORK GO-G sign-off. Elena watches the shorthand capture patterns she's been tracing through documents and maps. The 2% notation confirming communities maintaining careful reserves above projected needs, demonstrating resource management capacity that indicates readiness for enhanced autonomy. Nipton follows with neighborly tone that would have surprised this room years ago. Nipton Community Council to Relay, shared patrol schedule confirmed with Novak. School cooperative piloting astronomy nights, clear skies permitting. Water Committee reports surplus rolled into reserve, 2% standard. Requesting update on revised frequencies for Oakhaven Consortium. Between official check-ins, civilian bands breathe with gentle chatter that never overwhelms the room. Traders compare road conditions without drama. Teachers discuss curriculum adaptations. Specialists offer innovations in agriculture and craftsmanship. Rebecca lets conversations flow like creeks, intervening only to prevent overlap, noting tone as much as content. Informal networks carry competence tonight, small pieces of knowledge settling where needed. The most significant change, Rebecca explains during a pause between transmissions, is how communities have learned to coordinate rather than report. They're not requesting permission anymore. They're sharing information and arranging cooperation with settlements facing similar challenges. Elena reviews Rebecca's logbooks from previous months, noting gradual transformation from hierarchical reporting to horizontal coordination. Early entries document standard military check-ins emphasizing security status and resource needs. Recent entries record collaborative planning sessions, inter-community agreements, and innovations shared through local experimentation. Clearwater Settlement arrives with measured care. Request confirmation on shared channel allocation for Crossroads Cooperative. We have aligned our reserve reporting to new guidance. Observed phrase, glimpse of glory, used as sign-off by adjacent communities. We've adopted the usage. The words mean one thing. The cadence suggests more. Rebecca responds with respect that invites clarity, confirming allocations while offering space for additional context. Clearwater's reply carries gratitude and relief. We have formalized a 3-settlement quorum for resource adjustments. The phrase harmonizes with Marcus's boundary revisions and Elena's circled notations, revealing communities learning to breathe differently within maintained networks. The phrase, glimpse of glory, surfaces throughout evening sign-offs, spoken with gentle satisfaction of people accomplishing meaningful work through cooperative effort. Rebecca explains how it emerged organically in community communications, representing shared achievement rather than individual advancement, collective problem-solving rather than competitive success. It started appearing about 6 months ago, Rebecca notes, while maintaining clear reception. Communities began using it to describe successful cooperation, joint patrols preventing conflicts, resource sharing, preventing shortages. Collaborative planning, producing better outcomes than any settlement could achieve alone. The phrase captures something about shared satisfaction that individual achievement doesn't encompass. Ranger traffic arrives on schedule, voices carrying calm weight of desert stones. Ranger Hernandez, District 7, reporting. Volunteer watches functioning as planned. Mediation concluded between Willow Bend and Junction. Grain storage rotation agreed upon. No further assistance requested. The report's brevity is its own praise, communities handling their own affairs competently. Dr. Wong's circuit follows with practiced composure. Clinic 5 to relay. 2 new trainees certified in wound care protocols. Shared inventory established with North Road Dispensary. Reserve thresholds matched. Traveling to Ash Mesa at first light. Request acknowledgement for Clearwater's advanced saline shipment. Signing with a glimpse of glory. Messages fold into one another with rehearsed grace. Caravan masters confirm route stability while announcing transitions to local dispatch. School cooperatives coordinate radio story hours for children across 3 settlements. Mechanics share resources and expertise through patient networks of mutual aid. Just after midnight, Rebecca monitors training frequencies where councils practice civil communication. New facilitators rehearse clear phrasing for motions. Recorder apprentices practice reading minutes aloud. Point of clarity, a young voice steadies itself. We propose that any drawdown of more than 2% from reserve triggers notice to partner settlements. The phrase lands like a bridge set gently across a creek. Rebecca prepares her pre-dawn digest while horizon remains a thought. Her summary documents competence. Clearwater explaining quorums, Dr. Wong noting matched thresholds. Ranger Hernandez confirming successful mediation. She includes annotations cross-referencing Marcus's adjusted boundaries and Elena's circles, sketching 2 overlapping rings representing old administrative networks and new distributed councils sharing fields at dusk. Morning glows along the sill as Rebecca seals reports and keys quiet notes to Elena. The relay hum endures, carrying voices that speak of partnership rather than hierarchy into desert night. What maps suggested? Voices confirmed, preparing Elena for her next discovery in the careful documentation of institutional transformation where governance grows from soil and policy. Rooftop gardens and opened ledgers, patient circles awaiting meaning under careful daylight. The frequencies that carried voices through Rebecca's evening sweep now guide Elena eastward with the dawn, following invisible threads of communication toward the Regional Administrative Center, where Governor Sarah Martinez tends her rooftop garden with the same patient attention she brings to governing territories, learning new relationships with authority. The journey passes through quiet streets where morning light touches familiar buildings, each structure serving communities that have grown beyond their original dependence on distant oversight. Elena arrives as first sunlight warms terracotta containers arranged in careful rows across the building's roof. Hardy post-war vegetables growing in formations that speak of both practical necessity and aesthetic consideration. Sarah moves between raised beds with movements worn smooth by daily repetition, her hands testing soil moisture, adjusting plant support, and examining fruit with the gentle precision of someone who understands that growth requires patience rather than force. The scent of damp earth mingles with desert air, creating an unexpected sanctuary where policy decisions root themselves in practical wisdom. Archivist Vasquez, Sarah greets without turning from her examination of bean vines, her voice carrying the calm confidence Elena has observed throughout her investigation. Rebecca mentioned you were documenting patterns in our territorial transitions. I wondered when our paths would cross. She brushes soil from her hands with a cloth that shows signs of daily use, then gestures toward a weathered table where overnight dispatches wait beside a leather journal marked only with a pressed leaf. Elena opens her satchel, and arranges her collected materials beside Sarah's morning reports, creating a conversation between documentary evidence and administrative reality. The water allocation ledger, with its recurring 2% notations, sits beside settlement requests for graduated independence. Marcus's boundary revisions complement territorial adjustment approvals, and Rebecca's communication logs parallel coordination directives. Morning light reveals connections that individual documents only suggested. Sarah's gardening journal lies open beside official logs, its pages containing reflections that extend beyond horticulture into governance philosophy. The vegetables here teach resource management through necessity, she explains while checking irrigation lines that serve both plants and building systems. They thrive not on abundance, but on careful attention to actual needs, building resilience through adaptation rather than dependence on external support. Communities require similar consideration. Elena studies entries where Sarah's precise handwriting documents both policy outcomes and personal reflections about the ethics of managed transition. The 2% reserve requirement appears throughout these materials. Elena observes, pointing to patterns that have guided her investigation. Communities maintaining those margins seem to correlate with requests for enhanced autonomy. Sarah nods while adjusting bamboo supports with gentle precision. The pattern emerged from observation rather than mandate. Communities that consistently manage resources with small margins demonstrate the kind of planning capacity that indicates readiness for increased responsibility. They've learned to look beyond immediate needs toward sustainable practices that serve both individual and collective welfare. Elena examines correspondence between Sarah's office and settlement councils, noting how language has evolved from formal requests for permission toward collaborative announcements of community decisions. The shift reflects growing confidence in local governance capacity and comfort with increased responsibility for collective welfare. The phrase, "glimpse of glory," appears throughout these communications. Elena notes, recognizing language that has become familiar across multiple contexts. Communities seem to understand it as representing cooperative achievement rather than individual success. Sarah pauses in her plant tending, a small smile softening her administrative demeanor. The phrase emerged naturally in community communications, but we've observed how it captures something essential about the Republic's evolving identity. Glory, in this context, means satisfaction derived from problems solved through cooperation, neighbors helped through shared resources, conflicts resolved through patient dialogue rather than external intervention. The morning consultation unfolds with measured pace as Sarah demonstrates her decision-making process, showing Elena how territorial adjustments require verification from multiple sources. Resource surveys, communication assessments, trade route analysis, and community readiness evaluations. Each approval represents weeks of consultation, ensuring changes serve practical needs rather than political preferences. Sarah's administrative reports document policy outcomes with the same careful attention she applies to garden maintenance. Communities achieving enhanced autonomy status demonstrate measurably better resource management, more effective conflict resolution, and stronger cooperative relationships than territories under direct administration. The data suggests distributed governance produces better results than centralized control when communities possess adequate capacity for self-management. Elena reviews case studies from Sarah's files, noting how communities maintaining consistent reserves above projected needs demonstrate the careful planning that indicates readiness for self-governance. The pattern validates her growing understanding that apparent institutional decline actually represents sophisticated adaptation to post-war realities, the Republic learning to distribute strength rather than concentrate it. The most challenging aspect of this transition, Sarah reflects while harvesting vegetables for morning meals, involves determining when communities are truly ready for increased autonomy versus when they simply desire it. Premature independence can create instability. Delayed independence can create resentment. The reserve requirement provides objective evidence of management capacity. Sarah's gardening journal contains a final observation that connects with everything Elena has discovered. True achievement lies in creating systems that can function without constant oversight, communities that can solve problems through cooperation, and networks that grow stronger as they become more distributed. She closes the journal and offers Elena a small tomato, still cool from night air. A gift from the garden and a reminder that growth often happens quietly beneath the surface. As Elena prepares her notes for the next phase of investigation, her understanding enriched by seeing how policy implementation reflects the patterns she's been documenting through archives, maps, and communications. The parallel work of both women, Sarah documenting policy outcomes while Elena traces human stories behind administrative decisions, reveals how institutional change can honor both practical needs and deeper values. Morning progresses as Sarah organizes materials for afternoon consultations, her movements carrying the calm efficiency of someone whose work serves both practical necessity and philosophical principle. The garden's irrigation system cycles quietly in the background, providing steady moisture that enables growth without creating dependency. A metaphor, Sarah explains, applies directly to governance philosophy. Elena secures her materials and prepares to continue her investigation, knowing her next destination lies along the trade routes that connect these evolving communities. As she descends from the rooftop garden, morning sun catches water droplets on vegetable leaves, each one reflecting light like small glimpses of the glory that communities achieve through patient cooperation and mutual aid. The story must travel now from desks and rooftops to open roads, where practice becomes habit and habit becomes culture, following the ancient rhythms of commerce and connection that bind settlements together across vast distances. The morning light that blessed Sarah's rooftop garden now follows Elena along dusty paths toward the regional caravan staging ground, where canvas and cordage replace leaves and irrigation lines, and the day sounds different but means the same thing. Careful preparation for work that asks steadiness rather than force. Here, veteran caravan master Thomas Wright stands beside his lead Brahmin with one weathered hand resting on the animal's patient neck, feeling the quiet heat of a creature that has learned the rhythm of roads longer than most maps remember. Elena arrives as Thomas completes his morning inspection ritual, a sequence of modest gestures that together create safety across vast distances. He lifts each hoof to check the shoes, brushes grit from sensitive pads, and speaks in low tones as if the animals understand meaning beyond words. His fingers trace wheel rims to feel for splinters the eye might miss, count water casks twice, then test seals with gentle pressure that confirms what numbers might exaggerate. A small bell hangs from the second wagon's tongue. He rings it once to hear the clear note that tells him everything sits properly secured. Archivist Vasquez, Thomas greets while adjusting pack straps with practiced precision, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone accustomed to making words count across long distances. Governor Martinez mentioned you're documenting patterns in territorial transitions. The roads tell their own version of that story, if you know how to read the signs. He gestures toward his route maps, spread across a weathered cargo crate, layers of annotation built up over decades of careful travel. Elena examines Thomas's cartographic collection, noting how traditional NCR supply lines appear in faded blue ink, while newer cooperative trading networks glow in fresh green annotations. Red circles mark community-managed distribution points that correspond exactly to settlements maintaining 2% reserves in her water allocation ledger. The maps breathe with living information, constantly updated to reflect economic relationships that serve community needs rather than administrative convenience. Thomas demonstrates his planning process with the patient attention Sarah brought to her garden maintenance. Where once caravans delivered predetermined quotas to centralized distribution points, they now respond to community requests coordinated through local quartermasters who understand their settlement's actual requirements rather than projected estimates. His cargo manifest reflects this evolution. Medical supplies requested by communities with aging populations, educational materials for settlements expanding their schools, infrastructure components for towns developing energy independence. The most significant change, Thomas explains while checking compass bearings and weather predictions, is how communities have learned to anticipate their needs and communicate them clearly. We're not delivering emergency supplies anymore. We're participating in planned resource sharing between settlements that understand their own capacity and limitations. His correspondence files contain letters that carry the thoughtful tone Elena recognizes. From her archive research, communities describing needs in terms of contribution to regional welfare rather than individual necessity. The caravan's canvas creaks gently as morning progresses. Thomas showing Elena how route adjustments reflect community development rather than administrative mandate. Settlements achieving enhanced autonomy status coordinate their own supply needs through cooperative agreements, reducing dependence on centralized logistics while maintaining access to specialized goods no single community can produce independently. His trading post contacts include both traditional NCR suppliers and emerging community cooperatives that specialize in locally produced innovations. Elena notes how Thomas's network corresponds to patterns she's documented throughout her investigation. Communities maintaining consistent reserves above projected needs demonstrate the planning capacity that Marcus mapped in his boundary revisions, Rebecca monitored through communication networks, and Sarah validated through policy implementation. The convergence reinforces her understanding that apparent territorial changes represent sophisticated adaptation rather than institutional failure. The phrase "glimpse of glory" appears throughout your trading correspondence, Elena observes, recognizing language that has become familiar across multiple contexts. Settlement quartermasters seem to use it as both greeting and farewell when discussing cooperative arrangements. Thomas nods while securing cargo with rope worn smooth by years of use. It started appearing in trade negotiations about 6 months ago. Communities use it to describe successful cooperation. Joint purchasing agreements that benefit multiple settlements, resource sharing that prevents shortages, collaborative planning that produces better outcomes than any town could achieve alone. The phrase captures something about shared satisfaction that individual profit doesn't encompass. At midday, they pause beneath a repaired water tower, where shade falls like benediction across desert landscape. Thomas loosens harness cinches and offers the Brahmin quiet reassurance, his movements synchronized with their patient breathing. The radio murmurs with Ranger Hernandez's brief update, voice even and grounded, reporting volunteer watches functioning as planned. Mediation concluded between neighboring settlements, routes clear for continued travel. No requests for additional support. Thomas makes a small mark beside District 7 on his route sheet, the notation documenting competence rather than crisis. Afternoon brings them to a crossroads where a simple schoolhouse shares fencing with a seed storage facility, both buildings constructed from the same patient materials. 2 teenagers wait with a handcart and inventory list written in tidy block letters, their voices steady as they coordinate delivery of educational supplies. When the count reveals 2 extra readers beyond the manifest quantity, they smile without apology. "We'll pass the surplus along to Ash Mesa on clinic day," one explains. A cloth banner over the schoolhouse doorway announces astronomy night in letters made from fabric scraps, suggesting communities integrating scientific education with local resources. Thomas's evening planning sessions reveal the complex logistics required to serve communities learning self-governance while maintaining beneficial connections to broader networks. His rote schedules accommodate community meetings, seasonal variations in local production, and the collaborative decision-making processes that characterize settlements achieving enhanced autonomy status. He cross-references maps with communication updates from Rebecca's network, adjusting delivery schedules and cargo manifests to meet the nuanced needs of self-governing territories. Each settlement we visit, Thomas reflects while organizing materials by lamplight, teaches us something about adaptation and resilience. Communities that seemed dependent on external support discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed when given opportunity and encouragement to develop their own solutions to local challenges. His expertise helps ease transitions that might otherwise prove disruptive, ensuring roads continue serving travelers, regardless of which flags fly at their destinations. Elena secures her research materials as evening settles across the staging ground, knowing her investigation must now follow different threads toward the schools where communities prepare their children for citizenship, in a republic learning new definitions of strength and cooperation. As Thomas completes his preparations for tomorrow's departure, dust settles across familiar roads that carry both commerce and culture, connecting settlements practicing ancient principles of mutual aid through modern innovations in governance and resource management. The pattern continues revealing itself through patient observation, institutional transformation disguised as routine maintenance of essential services, where apparent contraction becomes expansion of local capacity. And the Republic's story continues in voices learning to speak of partnership rather than hierarchy across the vast wasteland distances. The roads that carried Thomas's caravan toward distant settlements now bring Elena to a schoolhouse where morning light filters through windows that once displayed only NCR educational materials, revealing walls that breathe with the voices of communities learning to teach their children about citizenship in a republic discovering new definitions of strength and cooperation. Teacher Janet Morrison arranges learning materials with the patient precision Elena has observed throughout her investigation, each gesture serving understanding rather than authority, adaptation rather than rigid compliance to distant mandates. Elena arrives as Janet completes her morning preparation ritual, a sequence of modest tasks that create space for young minds to flourish within evolving realities. She tests radio equipment connecting this classroom to others across the region, adjusts lighting to reduce glare on reading materials, and arranges community artifacts alongside traditional textbooks. The classroom smells of chalk dust and paper, leather bindings, and the faint metallic scent of pencil sharpeners maintained with careful attention. A cloth banner announces Astronomy Night in letters made from fabric scraps, evidence of communities integrating scientific education with local resources and cooperative learning. Archivist Vasquez, Janet greets while organizing materials that bridge old curricula with new realities, her voice carrying the calm confidence Elena recognizes from educators who understand that learning requires safety rather than pressure. Thomas mentioned you're documenting patterns in our territorial transitions. The classroom tells its own version of that story through voices of children learning to see continuity within change. She gestures toward student projects displayed along windows, maps, and reports, revealing how young minds process institutional evolution without fear. Elena examines the transformed learning environment, noting how Janet has integrated community knowledge holders into formal education without abandoning academic standards. Elder Maria Santos sits at a small table with 3 students, her weathered hands, demonstrating traditional weaving techniques while explaining mathematical concepts through pattern recognition. Former NCR specialist James Chen guides another group through map reading exercises that teach both geography and governance principles, showing how communities coordinate resources across territorial boundaries that shift like Marcus's cartographic revisions. The morning lesson unfolds with measured pace as Janet guides students through exercises, honoring both Republic civic values and local cultural traditions. Children ranging from long-time NCR families to recent arrivals from various wasteland communities work together on projects mapping their settlements, resource networks, and governance structures. Their conversations carry natural curiosity of minds, encountering complexity without anxiety, asking questions that reveal how institutional change appears to those who will inherit its consequences. "Miss Morrison," asks 10-year-old David Kim, his pencil hovering over a worksheet about water management, "why do some settlements manage their own resources while others still receive NCR supplies?" His question echoes Elena's investigation, suggesting children intuitively recognize patterns adults might overlook or rationalize through administrative complexity. Janet responds with patient clarity. Elena has observed throughout her research, explaining how communities develop different capabilities at different rates, some ready for increased responsibility, while others benefit from continued support. "The Republic's strength has always come from helping people help themselves," she explains while moving between student groups. "Sometimes that means providing direct assistance, sometimes teaching skills, and sometimes trusting communities to make their own decisions about local needs." Elena studies student projects demonstrating sophisticated understanding of regional cooperation. Maps show trade routes connecting settlements through resource-sharing agreements. Governance charts explain how communities coordinate security through volunteer patrols, and writing samples document local innovations in agriculture and craftsmanship. The work reflects educational standards maintained while adapting to community needs. Academic rigor, serving practical wisdom rather than abstract knowledge disconnected from daily experience. During mathematics instruction, Janet uses water management problems corresponding exactly to Elena's ledger research, teaching students to calculate reserve percentages and understand why communities maintaining small surpluses demonstrate planning capacity. The lesson integrates practical skills with civic education, showing how resource management requires both mathematical competence and ethical consideration of community welfare beyond individual need. The 2% reserve requirement appears throughout these materials. Elena observes, recognizing patterns that have guided her investigation through archives, maps, communications, and governance. Students seem to understand it as evidence of community readiness for increased responsibility rather than bureaucratic requirement. Janet nods while helping students work through calculation problems that mirror real resource decisions their families make daily. The concept provides concrete examples of how communities demonstrate capacity for self-governance. When settlements consistently maintain reserves above projected needs, they've proven ability to plan beyond immediate requirements and consider collective welfare alongside individual needs. Her teaching materials include simplified versions of Elena's archived documents, allowing students to practice reading skills while learning about institutional evolution that affects their daily lives. Afternoon brings collaborative projects where students from different settlements share innovations through radio connections, mirroring Rebecca's communication networks. Children in Good Springs describe their community's water conservation techniques to peers in Prim, who respond with information about cooperative gardening programs. The conversations carry the phrase "glimpse of glory" in contexts teaching young voices to see achievement through cooperation rather than competition, shared accomplishment rather than individual advancement. Elena examines lesson plans Janet shares with teachers in neighboring settlements, noting how educational coordination reflects the same patterns Marcus mapped in his boundary revisions. Schools maintain academic standards while adapting curricula to serve local needs, communities sharing resources and expertise through networks that strengthen rather than standardize educational approaches. The collaboration produces better outcomes than isolated instruction while preserving community identity and cultural traditions that give learning meaning. The most rewarding aspect of this work, Janet reflects while organizing materials for evening planning sessions, is watching students develop confidence in their ability to contribute to community welfare. They're learning that citizenship means active participation in problem-solving rather than passive acceptance of distant authority. Her student assessment records document measurable improvements in both academic performance and civic engagement among children experiencing education that integrates local knowledge with regional standards. As afternoon light slants through classroom windows, students practice reading by studying Elena's simplified archive summaries, encountering the phrase "glimpse of glory" in contexts teaching them to see continuity within change, preparing them for citizenship in a republic that distributes strength rather than concentrates it. Their voices carry curiosity without anxiety, confidence without arrogance, suggesting communities successfully transmitting values across generations while adapting institutions to serve evolving needs rather than administrative convenience. Elena prepares her materials for the next phase of investigation, her understanding deepened by witnessing how institutional transformation appears to those who will inherit its consequences. The story must travel now toward those who patrol these evolving territories, ensuring safety through presence rather than force, cooperation rather than control, following the ancient rhythms of protection that serve communities, learning to govern themselves while maintaining beneficial connections to broader networks of mutual aid and shared responsibility. The voices of students learning citizenship in Janet's classroom now guide Elena along dusty patrol routes, where morning light reveals a different kind of education taking place across territories, where NCR Ranger Captain Maria Hernandez conducts her rounds through landscapes that have learned to protect themselves. The desert breathes with patient rhythms Elena recognizes from her investigation, each landmark marking progress toward communities that provide their own security while maintaining connections to networks that strengthen through cooperation rather than control. Elena meets Maria at a weathered ranger station, where radio equipment hums with gentle efficiency, voices carrying routine check-ins that reveal settlements handling their own protection through trained volunteer forces, trading posts managed by cooperative councils, and natural boundaries that anchor collective memory across generations of institutional change. Maria adjusts communication frequencies with movements worn smooth by daily repetition, her hands testing signal strength with the patient precision of someone whose authority serves best when exercised least. Archivist Vasquez. Maria greets while organizing patrol materials with careful attention to detail, her voice carrying the measured cadence Elena recognizes from those who understand that presence serves better than force. Janet mentioned you're documenting patterns in our territorial transitions. The patrol routes tell their own version of that story through communities learning to maintain their own safety while coordinating regional security. She gestures toward maps marked with colored pins indicating volunteer patrol schedules, community watch rotations, and cooperative arrangements that function without requiring external oversight. Elena studies Maria's documentation, noting how traditional law enforcement reports have evolved into community liaison assessments, focusing on successful cooperation rather than problems requiring intervention. Settlement after settlement demonstrates capacity for self-governance through effective conflict resolution, resource management that maintains those crucial 2% reserves above projected needs, and collaborative decision-making that characterizes territories achieving enhanced autonomy status. The pattern reinforces everything Elena has discovered about institutional transformation disguised as routine maintenance of essential services. Their morning patrol begins at Good Springs, where volunteer coordinator Marcus Kim discusses regional security coordination with the calm confidence of someone managing systems that work. The volunteers demonstrate competence earned through months of training, their movements reflecting communities taking ownership of collective safety. A small chalkboard lists patrol schedules coordinated with neighboring settlements, each entry signed with initials and the phrase "glimpse of glory" appearing as natural punctuation for successful shifts completed without incident. The most significant development, Maria explains while reviewing security arrangements, is how settlements prevent conflicts through early intervention and cooperative problem-solving rather than waiting for external mediation after tensions escalate. Her patrol logs document successful resource dispute resolutions, boundary agreements, and the minor conflicts that arise naturally when communities interact across territorial borders that shift like Marcus's cartographic revisions, each resolution strengthening relationships rather than merely ending disagreements. At Prim's trading post, they encounter a real-time example of evolved conflict resolution. Two prospecting teams dispute claim boundaries near a promising mineral deposit, their voices carrying frustration that could escalate without patient intervention. Maria listens with the meditative attention Elena has observed throughout her investigation, asking clarifying questions that help both parties articulate their actual needs rather than their initial positions. The mediation reveals sophisticated understanding of cooperative principles, participants demonstrating commitment to regional stability while protecting legitimate interests. The phrase, "glimpse of glory," surfaces throughout these sessions, Elena observes, recognizing language that has become familiar across multiple contexts. Communities seem to understand it as representing successful cooperation rather than victory over opponents. Maria nods while documenting the resolution with attention to details that will prevent similar conflicts. The phrase captures something essential about how settlements approach disagreements as opportunities for strengthening relationships rather than zero-sum competitions. When communities work together to solve problems, everyone benefits from increased cooperation and trust. The prospecting teams agree to shared extraction schedules and equipment sharing that serves both groups better than exclusive claims. Their handshake accompanied by the familiar phrase spoken with quiet satisfaction. Afternoon brings them to border territories where 3 settlements coordinate security through volunteer networks that mirror Rebecca's communication systems. Local peacekeepers handle most situations without requiring NCR intervention, their competence suggesting communities successfully developing capacity for self-governance while maintaining beneficial connections to regional support. Their patrol schedules coordinate seamlessly, creating overlapping coverage that ensures safety through presence rather than force. Elena examines correlation between communities maintaining resource reserves and those demonstrating security self-sufficiency. Noting how territories marked with 2% in her water allocation, research also show capacity for effective security coordination. The pattern suggests readiness for increased responsibility reflects comprehensive community development rather than isolated improvements in single governance areas. Communities learning to breathe differently within maintained networks. Evening patrol concludes at a ranger station, where Maria compiles daily reports focusing on successful community cooperation rather than problems requiring external intervention. Her documentation includes collaborative security arrangements between settlements, resource-sharing agreements that prevent conflicts, and the growing network of trained peacekeepers who maintain regional stability through patient presence. The reports reflect institutional evolution Elena has traced through archives, maps, communications, governance, trade, and education, each thread weaving together into a tapestry of distributed strength. Each community we visit, Maria reflects while organizing materials for tomorrow's patrol, teaches us something about adaptation and resilience. Settlements that seemed dependent on external protection discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed when given opportunity and encouragement to develop their own solutions to security challenges. Her expertise helps communities transition from dependence to self-reliance, while maintaining connections to broader networks that provide support during exceptional circumstances requiring regional coordination. As evening settles across patrol routes, Maria reviews Elena's archive materials by lamplight, recognizing her own evolution reflected in the documents, from guardian to guide, from enforcer to facilitator, embodying the Republic's transformation from centralized authority to distributed partnership. The radio whispers with evening check-ins, carrying the phrase, "glimpse of glory," spoken by voices that have learned to find satisfaction in shared accomplishment rather than individual achievement. Elena prepares for the next phase of investigation, knowing the story must now follow different threads toward those who tend the health of these evolving communities, ensuring wellness through local capacity rather than distant expertise, healing through networks that distribute knowledge rather than concentrate it, following ancient rhythms of care that serve communities, learning to sustain themselves while maintaining beneficial connections to broader systems of mutual aid and shared responsibility across the vast wasteland distances. The patrol routes, where Maria maintains security through presence rather than force, now guide Elena toward medical circuits, where morning light reveals a different kind of protection taking place across territories, where Dr. Patricia Wong conducts her weekly rounds through settlements, learning to heal themselves. The desert breathes with patient rhythms Elena recognizes from her investigation, each landmark marking progress toward communities that provide their own health care while maintaining connections to networks that strengthen through cooperation rather than dependence on distant expertise. Elena meets Patricia at a converted clinic where weathered walls contain gleaming medical equipment and the patient organization of someone whose work demands absolute precision. The air carries comforting scents of antiseptic and clean linen, desert sage and sterilized instruments, ancient wisdom and modern medicine converging in territories where health becomes a community responsibility rather than an external service delivered by strangers who leave when crises pass. Archivist Vasquez, Patricia greets while organizing treatment materials with careful attention to both immediate needs and long-term sustainability. Her voice carrying the calm confidence Elena recognizes from healers who understand that teaching prevents more suffering than treating. Maria mentioned your documenting patterns and territorial transitions. The medical circuits tell their own version of that story, through communities learning to maintain health through local knowledge and cooperative resource sharing. Elena examines Patricia's documentation, noting how medical reports have evolved from individual treatment records toward community health assessments focusing on preventive care, local training programs, and inter-settlement medical cooperation. The pattern mirrors everything Elena has discovered about institutional transformation, apparent withdrawal of services, actually representing expansion of local capability. Communities discovering strengths they didn't know they possessed when supported to develop their own solutions rather than remaining dependent on external expertise. Patricia begins her morning routine with meditative precision, demonstrating the 3-bowl hygiene method to 2 community health trainees. Wash, rinse, sterile dip, she explains while her hands move through practiced motions. The second bowl must never grow cloudy, and the third gets replaced when its strength is spent. The trainees repeat movements until their hands remember, then note procedures in careful script on cards stamped with 2 small circles, the same symbol Elena recognizes from ledgers marking reserves and readiness throughout her investigation. Their first consultation demonstrates evolved medical practice, Patricia treating a rancher's infected wound while simultaneously teaching his daughter basic wound care protocols that will serve their family and neighbors. The lesson integrates immediate treatment with educational opportunity, building community capacity while addressing individual needs. The daughter's careful attention and thoughtful questions suggest communities successfully transmitting essential knowledge across generations. preparing young people to assume responsibility for collective welfare. The 2% reserve principle appears throughout medical supply management, Elena observes, recognizing patterns that have guided her investigation through archives, maps, communications, governance, trade, education, and security. Supply crates bear familiar notations: saline, sutures, antibiotics, soap, each labeled with consistent handwriting ending in +2%. Matching the reserve practice that has become quiet gospel across all aspects of community self-governance. Patricia nods while checking inventory that corresponds exactly to territories marked in Elena's water allocation. Research. Settlements that manage medical supplies with careful margins demonstrate understanding of both individual needs and collective responsibility. They've learned to anticipate requirements, coordinate resources with neighboring communities, and maintain reserves that serve regional stability during exceptional circumstances. A newer crate catches Elena's attention, its standard depot marking supplemented with penciled notation: advisory only. Shipments now travel with guidance, not command, Patricia explains while examining the advisory supplies. Use as needed. Substitute when local solutions suffice. Return if surplus. The phrase doesn't diminish authority. It reframes it. Elena thinks of Sarah's garden and Marcus's green boundaries, of Rebecca's conversational networks and Maria's patient mediations. The same principle translating through different crafts, arriving here as medical practice that serves rather than controls. At Clearwater's Health Center, they encounter community health committee planning, long-term care sustainability, their discussions revealing sophisticated understanding of preventive medicine, public health principles, and the cooperative relationships that make independent healthcare management possible. Committee members include former NCR medical personnel, who chose to remain as community advisors, local volunteers trained in basic health protocols, and traditional healers whose knowledge complements modern medicine through patient integration rather than competitive replacement. The phrase "glimpse of glory" surfaces throughout these planning sessions. Elena notes, recognizing language that has become familiar across all contexts of her investigation. Communities seem to understand it as representing successful cooperation in maintaining collective health rather than individual medical achievement. Patricia explains how the phrase emerged naturally in medical contexts, communities using it to describe successful prevention programs, cooperative medicine sharing that prevents shortages, and collaborative training that produces better health outcomes than any settlement could achieve through isolated effort. It captures something about shared satisfaction in collective wellness that individual recovery doesn't encompass. She reflects while reviewing training schedules coordinated between multiple settlements. Afternoon brings them to Ash Mesa, where Patricia observes local health workers conducting routine examinations with competence earned through months of careful instruction. Their movements reflect communities taking ownership of collective health, asking appropriate questions and recognizing situations requiring specialized consultation. The clinic's organization mirrors Patricia's own methods, supplies managed with attention to both immediate needs and sustainable inventory practices that maintain those crucial reserve margins above projected requirements. A soft conflict emerges during afternoon rounds. Two families disputing access to limited doses of rare antibiotics, their voices carrying frustration that could escalate without patient intervention. Patricia listens with meditative attention, asking clarifying questions that help both parties articulate actual needs rather than initial positions. The mediation reveals sophisticated understanding of cooperative principles, participants demonstrating commitment to regional health while protecting legitimate individual needs. The families agree to share doses, their handshake accompanied by the familiar phrase, "glimpse of glory," spoken with quiet satisfaction. Elena studies patient records documenting not just individual treatments, but community health trends, noting how settlements achieving enhanced autonomy status demonstrate measurably better health outcomes than territories under direct administration. The data suggests distributed healthcare produces superior results when communities possess adequate capacity for self-management. Preventive care, reducing need for crisis intervention, while cooperative resource sharing ensures access to specialized treatments requiring regional coordination. Evening consultation involves reviewing Elena's archive materials that document similar transitions in other regions, Patricia finding confirmation that apparent loss of centralized medical services often translates to increased community resilience and improved health outcomes. Communities discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed when given opportunity and encouragement to develop their own approaches to collective wellness, she observes, while organizing materials for tomorrow's circuit. As evening settles over the last clinic, Patricia documents successful community adaptations with the same patient attention Elena has observed throughout her investigation. Her reports focus on communities preventing health crises through cooperative planning, settlements sharing medical resources across traditional boundaries, and the growing network of trained local health workers who maintain regional wellness through distributed competence rather than centralized authority. Elena prepares for the next phase of investigation, knowing the story must now follow different threads toward the democratic institutions where communities practice the governance that makes all other cooperation possible. Following ancient rhythms of collective decision-making that serve territories, learning to sustain themselves while maintaining beneficial connections to broader systems of mutual aid and shared responsibility across the vast wasteland distances that connect rather than separate those who choose cooperation over competition in building their shared future. The medical circuits, where Patricia tends community health through distributed knowledge, now guide Elena toward democratic institutions, where evening light filters through windows of a community hall built from salvaged materials and sustained by collective effort, revealing the governance practices that make all other cooperation possible. Here, the Clearwater Settlement Council convenes for their weekly meeting, where residents gather to discuss their ongoing transition from NCR administration to full self-governance with the patient attention Elena has observed throughout her investigation. Elena arrives as council facilitator. David Kim arranges materials with the same methodical care she's witnessed from Marcus with his maps, Sarah with her garden, notes, and Patricia with her medical supplies. The hall breathes with comfortable sounds of people arriving for familiar work, chairs settling against wooden floors worn smooth by regular use, voices carrying the neighborly tone Rebecca monitored through evening frequencies, papers rustling with organized efficiency that mirrors administrative routines throughout the region. The meeting space reflects institutional evolution Elena has been documenting. A bowl of smooth river stones sits near the entrance. Each attendee takes one as they sign a cloth ledger, names written in ink that dries to gentle brown. The stones serve as speaking tokens, set down when offered, taken up when done, ensuring voices don't overlap in discussions where every perspective matters. On the far wall, the settlement charter displays hand-painted script, concluding with a simple benediction, "Glimpse of glory." Archivist Vasquez, David greets while testing microphone connections that link this hall to similar meetings across the region, his voice carrying calm confidence Elena recognizes from facilitators who understand that democracy requires practice rather than theory. Dr. Wong mentioned you're documenting patterns in territorial transitions. The council meetings tell their own version of that story, through voices learning to take ownership of collective decisions that shape their shared future. The evening agenda reflects sophisticated understanding of democratic governance. Residents prepare to discuss water rights management that corresponds exactly to Elena's ledger research, dispute resolution procedures that mirror Maria's mediation work, and resource-sharing agreements that validate Thomas's evolving trade networks. Their conversations carry thoughtful engagement of people who know their voices matter. Decisions affecting daily life rather than abstract policy implemented by distant authorities. The first matter moves with practiced ease. Seasonal adjustment to water-sharing protocols with neighboring Crossroads and Whisper Creek. A map unfolds across the central table, weighted at corners with glass jars filled with seeds that catch lamplight like small promises of future growth. Lines trace natural boundaries rather than administrative impositions, following watersheds and ridgelines that serve practical cooperation. Our current reserves, reports the Water Committee coordinator, her voice steady with competence earned through months of careful management, maintain 2% above projected needs, consistent with regional guidance and our cooperative agreements. The familiar percentage lands in Elena's notebook like a puzzle piece finding its proper place, communities demonstrating readiness for self-governance through consistent resource management that serves both individual and collective welfare. A boundary dispute receives patient mediation that demonstrates institutional evolution in action. Two families sharing fence lines speak, carefully, voices carrying respect for ongoing relationships that extend beyond immediate disagreements. David guides discussion toward needs rather than positions, encouraging collaborative solutions that strengthen community bonds rather than merely resolving conflicts. The resolution involves shared windbreak planting that serves both parties better than exclusive claims, their agreement accompanied by the familiar phrase, "glimpse of glory," spoken with quiet satisfaction. Elena studies resident participation, noting how discussions integrate multiple perspectives through processes encouraging collaboration rather than competition. Former NCR personnel contribute administrative expertise while respecting community preferences. Long-term residents share historical knowledge while welcoming newcomers' innovations, and younger voices propose solutions honoring both tradition and adaptation. The conversations reflect democratic principles functioning through daily practice rather than periodic performance. Point of clarity, requests Sarah Chen, her voice carrying confidence of meaningful participation. The proposed resource-sharing agreement with Ash Mesa. Does this require formal NCR approval, or can we proceed under enhanced autonomy provisions? Her question reflects communities learning to distinguish between decisions requiring external consultation and those within local governance capacity, institutional boundaries shifting like Marcus's cartographic revisions. David responds with patient clarity, honoring both community autonomy and regional coordination principles. Enhanced autonomy status allows resource-sharing agreements between settlements without requiring external approval, provided they maintain reserve. Requirements and communication protocols ensuring regional stability. The explanation demonstrates institutional evolution Elena has documented. Communities developing confidence in local decision-making while maintaining beneficial connections to broader networks. The Council addresses educational initiatives reflecting Janet's collaborative teaching approaches, approving resource exchanges with neighboring schools, and establishing protocols for inter-community educational programs. Their decisions integrate academic standards with local needs, communities sharing expertise while preserving cultural traditions that give learning meaning beyond standardized requirements. Evening progresses as residents work through challenges requiring both practical wisdom and ethical consideration. Health Committee report documents successful coordination with Patricia's medical networks. Security updates confirm effective collaboration with Maria's volunteer patrol systems and communication protocols, validate Rebecca's frequency management serving community needs, rather than administrative convenience. A letter arrives, marked with 2 small circles and careful block print reading "Advisory Only." The correspondence, signed with initial D and surname Kim, concerns the regional supply depot. It proposes that Clearwater join neighboring settlements in piloting transformation already underway, shifting the depot's purpose from central dispenser to community resource hub. Inventory matched to council-approved plans for local capacity development. Elena watches the council examine the proposal with careful attention, residents discussing implications for community self-reliance while maintaining beneficial connections to regional support networks. The letter suggests items be categorized by function rather than administrative convenience. Solar kits become evening school light for 3 rooms. Purification units become maintenance for shared tap stand. Medical supplies align with Patricia's training cycles rather than generic thresholds. Process carries the proposal forward with gentleness, characteristic of communities learning democratic governance through practice. Instead of single votes, the Council adopts sequential affirmations. First, statement of values, ensuring distribution strengthens capacity rather than dependency. Next, assessment of readiness, identifying where instruction remains needed. Then, timeline allowing careful implementation with review periods. Finally, invitation for the quartermaster to visit personally, understanding community needs through direct conversation rather than distant assumption. As the meeting concludes with residents scheduling follow-up working groups, Elena notes quiet pride in voices taking ownership of their community's future. Their discussions reflect confidence in local democratic institutions and commitment to cooperative relationships, sustaining the region's network of independent but connected communities. The evening's work demonstrates institutional transformation Elena has traced through every aspect of territorial evolution, apparent withdrawal of external authority, actually representing expansion of local capacity. David organizes materials for next week's session, while residents continue conversations begun in formal meeting, their voices carrying neighborly tones suggesting democracy, functioning through daily practice rather than periodic ceremony. Elena prepares for the next phase of investigation, knowing the story must follow the logistics that make all cooperation possible. The careful redistribution of resources enabling communities to achieve self-reliance. They've been practicing through governance, trade, education, security, health, and democratic participation across vast distances, connecting rather than separating those choosing cooperation over competition. The democratic voices that shaped Clearwater's Evening Council now guide Elena toward the logistical heart of institutional transformation, following morning light through warehouse doors, where the air carries familiar scents of canvas and oiled machinery, organized materials, and patient efficiency. Here, Quartermaster Daniel Kim oversees the methodical conversion of the regional NCR supply depot from centralized distribution center to community resource hub, his movements bearing the same careful precision Elena has observed throughout her investigation of territories, learning to breathe differently within maintained networks. Elena arrives as Daniel completes his morning inventory ritual, clipboard and scanner moving through organized rows with meditative attention to details that serve cooperation rather than dependence. The warehouse breathes with quiet efficiency, pallets arranged in thoughtful formations that reflect community-specific needs rather than administrative convenience. Medical supplies wait beside educational materials and infrastructure components, each allocation representing the Republic's final concentrated investment in regions demonstrating readiness for enhanced self-governance through consistent resource management and democratic participation. Archivist Vasquez, Daniel greets while adjusting inventory tags with attention. Ensuring accurate distribution serves locally determined priorities, his voice carrying calm confidence of someone whose expertise enables communities to discover their own capabilities. The council minutes mentioned you're documenting territorial transition patterns. The depot tells its own version of that story through materials flowing towards settlements that have proven capacity for responsible independence rather than continued dependence on external oversight. Elena examines Daniel's transformed logistics system, noting how traditional supply chains have evolved to serve community development phases rather than standardized distributions. Instead of generic categories, materials group according to readiness assessments. Foundation building contains basic infrastructure. Capacity. Development holds training materials and specialized equipment, while sustainability support offers maintenance supplies enabling long-term self-reliance. Each section corresponds to territories marked in Marcus's boundary revisions, settlements achieving different levels of autonomous governance through demonstrated competence. The depot's organization reflects institutional evolution Elena has traced through every aspect of her investigation. Solar panel systems wait for communities developing energy independence, like Sarah's rooftop garden principles applied to larger scales. Water purification equipment serves settlements assuming responsibility for their own utilities while maintaining those crucial 2% reserves above projected needs. Educational resources support schools adapting curricula to local requirements while preserving academic standards. Janet demonstrated through collaborative teaching approaches, integrating community knowledge with formal instruction. Daniel demonstrates his allocation process with attention to community readiness rather than administrative quotas. Enhanced autonomy settlements receive materials supporting self-reliance, projects they've planned through local democratic processes, he explains while reviewing requests from David's council meeting. Transitional communities get intensive assistance building local capacity before NCR services shift to advisory roles only. His manifest sheets carry familiar notations, those recurring 2% markers indicating communities maintaining resource reserves that demonstrate planning capacity and readiness for increased responsibility. A crate catches Elena's attention, its standard depot marking supplemented with penciled notation in careful script. Advisory only. Consider local solutions first. Daniel explains the concept emerging from Governor Martinez's office, policy reflecting the same philosophical framework Elena discovered in Catherine Torres's speech draft. Instead of mandating specific solutions, we offer guidance and alternatives, trusting communities to choose approaches that serve their actual needs, rather than our administrative assumptions about what they should require. Transport coordinators arrive like reliable tides, exchanging route notes with Thomas's caravan crews and newer cooperatives moving goods along shorter, more responsive loops. Daniel's conversations carry the tone of someone who trusts community judgment, asking what changed since last delivery, what worked effectively, what needs were misjudged, then updating allocations without drama through steady mathematics of real lives, lived cooperatively. A representative from Junction requests generator equipment for clinic expansion. Daniel responds by presenting options, fuel cycle calculations alongside solar alternatives, inviting comparison rather than imposing preferences. Elena studies correlation between communities requesting specific materials and those demonstrating comprehensive readiness for self-governance through Patricia's health networks, Maria's volunteer security systems, and Rebecca's communication coordination. Settlements maintaining water reserves, managing security through trained volunteers, coordinating education through cooperative programs, and practicing democratic governance through regular council meetings receive materials supporting advanced self-reliance projects. The pattern suggests institutional transformation serves communities proving capacity for responsible independence, rather than rewarding continued dependence. The phrase, "glimpse of glory," appears throughout community correspondence. Elena observes, recognizing language that has become familiar across all contexts of her investigation. Settlements seem to understand resource sharing as representing cooperative achievement rather than external charity or individual accumulation. Daniel nods while organizing afternoon deliveries according to community development timelines rather than administrative convenience. The phrase captures something essential about how settlements approach resource management as opportunities for strengthening regional cooperation. When communities coordinate their needs and share surplus materials, everyone benefits from increased efficiency and mutual support rather than competitive scarcity. His records document successful resource exchanges between settlements, communities discovering they can meet many requirements through cooperative arrangements rather than external dependence on distant authority. Afternoon brings verification meetings where settlement representatives confirm material allocations, match community plans developed through local democratic processes David facilitated. The conversations demonstrate sophisticated understanding of resource management principles, participants explaining how requested materials serve specific projects, contributing to regional welfare rather than individual consumption. Their voices carry confidence of people taking ownership of collective development, speaking the language of partnership rather than hierarchy, across vast distances that connect rather than separate. Evening planning sessions involve cross-referencing community requests with readiness assessments, ensuring materials serve sustainable development rather than temporary relief. Daniel coordinates with Thomas's caravan networks, ensuring delivery schedules accommodate community meetings and seasonal priorities, while maintaining the patient efficiency that characterizes institutional transformation throughout the region. His work integrates with every aspect of territorial evolution Elena has documented. Logistics serving cooperative development rather than administrative routine imposed from distant offices. The most satisfying aspect of this transformation, Daniel reflects while organizing materials for tomorrow's distributions, is witnessing how communities develop confidence in their ability to manage resources responsibly. Settlements that seemed dependent on external support discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed when given opportunity and encouragement to develop their own solutions to local challenges through patient cooperation and mutual aid. As evening settles across the depot, Daniel reviews Elena's archive materials, showing similar transitions in other regions, finding confirmation that apparent resource loss often translates to increased local resilience and improved outcomes for communities learning to govern themselves. The depot's gentle hum of climate control systems creates preservation around materials that will help settlements achieve the self-reliance they've been practicing through governance, trade, education, security, health, and democratic participation across networks that distribute strength rather than concentrate it. Elena prepares for the culminating phase of her investigation, knowing the story must now return to the archive where all these threads converge into comprehensive understanding of institutional transformation that appears as decline, but reveals itself as sophisticated adaptation to post-war realities. The pattern continues revealing itself through patient observation, apparent contraction becoming expansion of local capacity, the Republic's story continuing in voices learning to speak of partnership rather than hierarchy. Ancient principles of mutual aid expressed through modern innovations in governance and resource management serving communities that choose cooperation over competition in building their shared future. The methodical transformation of Daniel's supply depot now carries Elena back to where her investigation began, following evening light through familiar corridors toward the archive where morning once revealed 4 mysterious artifacts arranged like questions waiting for patient answers. The brass seal of the new California Republic catches lamplight as Elena enters the climate-controlled sanctuary, her leather satchel heavy with documents that have transformed from puzzles into pieces of a vast, gentle pattern requiring only careful arrangement to reveal its complete meaning. Elena begins her evening ritual with the devotion of someone who understands that order creates clarity. She trims the lamp wick, though. Artificial light already fills the room, adjusts the brass seal to catch optimal illumination, and clears the long oak table of everything except the original 4 artifacts that sparked her investigation. The faded speech draft, the preserved flag with its carefully removed star, the water allocation ledger with recurring penciled notations, and the ranger's journal with square handwriting. Each item now ready to receive the context that will transform mystery into understanding. She spreads her collected materials across the table's scarred surface like pieces of a patient puzzle, each document finding its natural place within an emerging constellation of evidence. Marcus's boundary maps align with water allocation ledgers showing those recurring 2% notations. Rebecca's communication logs complement settlement requests for enhanced autonomy status. Sarah's gardening journal connects with Patricia's medical network assessments. Maria's security reports validate David's council meeting minutes. Thomas's trade route adjustments mirror Daniel's resource distribution patterns. Janet's educational innovations correspond with community readiness indicators across every aspect of territorial evolution she's documented. The archive breathes with familiar sounds of careful work. Climate control humming its steady song, pages rustling with organized efficiency, the soft scratch of pencil marking connections that individual observations only hinted at. Morning's scattered mysteries now converge into afternoon's comprehensive understanding, threads weaving together into a tapestry that tells the story not of institutional collapse, but of institutional metamorphosis. The Republic's core values finding new expression through community-centered rather than capital-centered organization. Elena traces the water allocation pattern with growing comprehension, her analysis revealing how those recurring 2% reserves represent sophisticated policy implementation rather than administrative oversight. Communities maintaining consistent margins above projected needs demonstrate the planning capacity that indicates readiness for enhanced self-governance. Settlements proving their ability to anticipate requirements and manage resources responsibly. The penciled notations serve as quiet indicators of communities prepared for the next phase of institutional evolution, territories earning increased autonomy through demonstrated competence rather than political preference. The unsigned circulars emerge as evidence of policy implementation through suggestion rather than mandate, their careful phrasing encouraging community development while respecting local decision-making processes. Elena recognizes the handwriting style from Catherine Torres's speech draft, the same measured script choosing gentle verbs over commanding ones, advisory language over administrative directives. The absence of signatures speaks not to anonymity, but to collective ownership of change, policies traveling on their merit rather than authority, communities choosing cooperation because it serves their interests rather than accepting it through external compulsion. The phrase, "glimpse of glory," reveals itself as cultural shorthand for the Republic's evolving identity, communities using it to describe satisfaction derived from problems solved through cooperation, neighbors helped through shared resources, conflicts resolved through patient dialogue rather than external intervention. Elena's documentation shows the phrase emerging naturally across all contexts. Trade negotiations, medical consultations, security mediations, educational planning, democratic governance, and resource management, suggesting institutional transformation occurring through cultural evolution rather than administrative decree. Her analysis reveals how former NCR territories have maintained essential services while developing local governance capacity through patient institutional evolution. Trade networks adapted to serve community cooperatives rather than centralized markets. Thomas's roots reflecting economic relationships that strengthen regional stability through distributed prosperity. Security arrangements evolved from top-down law enforcement to collaborative peacekeeping between settlements, Maria's patrols facilitating cooperation rather than imposing order through external authority. Educational systems integrated community knowledge with formal instruction, Janet's classroom demonstrating how academic standards serve local needs while preserving cultural traditions that give learning meaning beyond standardized requirements. Healthcare networks distributed medical knowledge rather than concentrating expertise. Patricia's circuits, building community capacity for sustainable wellness management. Democratic institutions practiced governance through regular participation rather than periodic ceremony. David's council meetings, enabling collective decision-making that serves community welfare rather than administrative convenience. Elena examines correlations between communities maintaining resource reserves and those demonstrating comprehensive readiness for enhanced self-governance. Settlements marked with 2% in water ledgers also show capacity for effective security coordination through volunteer networks, successful educational adaptation through cooperative programs, sustainable healthcare management through trained local workers, and democratic governance through regular council participation. The pattern suggests readiness for increased autonomy, reflects holistic community development rather than isolated improvements in single governance areas. The archive's comprehensive records reveal institutional transformation occurring through careful planning rather than crisis response. Regional administrators, understanding that sustainable governance requires communities capable of governing themselves. Daniel's depot transformation from centralized distribution to community resource hub reflects the same principle applied to logistics, materials serving locally determined priorities rather than administratively imposed solutions that may not match actual community needs or cultural preferences. Elena traces the administrative architecture supporting these transitions, noting how policy quietly shifted to encourage community development rather than dependency. Sarah's garden journal contains reflections about governance philosophy that complement Catherine Torres's speech draft, both documents explaining how true achievement lies in creating systems that can function without constant oversight, communities that can solve problems through cooperation, and networks that grow stronger as they become more distributed rather than more centralized. As Elena prepares her comprehensive report, she recognizes that her archive tells the story not of institutional collapse, but of institutional metamorphosis. The Republic's core values of cooperation and democratic governance are finding new expression through community-centered rather than capital-centered organization. The pattern suggests that apparent endings can mask sophisticated beginnings, systems learning to distribute strength rather than concentrate it in ways that serve both practical efficiency and democratic principles. The climate control system cycles quietly in the background, creating preservation around stories that will help future communities understand how large institutions can evolve gracefully rather than simply collapse or rigidly persist. Elena's documentation reveals a region where communities have learned to coordinate rather than merely report, settlements requesting enhanced autonomy because they've demonstrated capacity for responsible self-governance rather than because they reject Republican principles or external cooperation. Elena's final analysis describes institutional metamorphosis, disguised as routine maintenance of essential services, apparent contraction revealing itself as expansion of local capacity, and the Republic's story continuing in voices that speak of partnership rather than hierarchy, across vast distances that connect rather than separate those who choose cooperation over competition in building their shared future. As she organizes materials for tomorrow's deeper investigation, Elena understands that the speech draft waiting in her satchel contains the philosophical framework that guided this quiet transformation, its faded wisdom ready to illuminate how apparent decline can mask sophisticated adaptation to post-war realities, where the Republic's strength flows not from distant authority, but from the patient competence of communities learning to govern themselves while maintaining beneficial connections to broader networks of mutual aid and shared responsibility. The comprehensive patterns Elena arranged across her archive table now guide her back to the faded speech draft that began her investigation, the document waiting patiently through her journey across territories, learning new relationships with authority. Evening light filters through climate-controlled windows as she lifts the aged paper with reverent care, understanding finally arriving like sunrise after patient darkness. The handwriting she now recognizes as belonging to former regional administrator Catherine Torres carries different weight. Words transformed from mysterious artifact into philosophical framework that guided institutional metamorphosis disguised as routine administrative transition. Elena spreads the speech draft beside her collected evidence, noting how Catherine's careful cursive connects with every aspect of territorial evolution she's documented. The penciled revisions speak to collaborative development rather than individual composition, margins filled with suggestions in different hands. Sarah's precise lettering about trust-building strength, Marcus's cartographic notes about boundaries serving people rather than administrative convenience, Rebecca's observations about voluntary network participation. The paper feels soft with handling, edges worn smooth by readers who found wisdom worth preserving and practicing rather than proclaiming. "Glory, I have come to believe," Catherine's opening lines read with measured cadence Elena recognizes from voices throughout her investigation, is not found in conquest or expansion, but in the careful tending of systems that allow people to flourish without constant oversight. The phrase lands differently now, informed by Sarah's garden philosophy, Marcus's boundary wisdom, Rebecca's communication networks, Maria's evolved patrols, Patricia's distributed healthcare, Janet's collaborative education, David's democratic facilitation, Thomas's adaptive trade routes, and Daniel's transformed logistics serving community development rather than administrative convenience. Elena traces the penciled marks where Catherine hesitated and revised, choosing plain words over grand ones, practical wisdom over political rhetoric. Cross-outs reveal rejected phrases. Republic dominance becomes regional cooperation. Territorial control transforms into community partnership. Administrative efficiency evolves into local capacity building. Each revision moves away from language of authority toward vocabulary of service, institutions existing to enable rather than direct, coordinate rather than command. The margins contain the familiar 2% notation that guided Elena's entire investigation, now revealed as deliberate policy rather than administrative anomaly. Catherine's draft explains, communities demonstrating consistent resource margins above projected needs prove their capacity for the kind of planning that indicates readiness for enhanced responsibility. The 2% standard serves not as bureaucratic requirement, but as objective evidence of management competence, settlements earning increased autonomy through demonstrated capability rather than political preference. Elena examines passages connecting Catherine's theoretical framework to practical outcomes she observed across territorial transitions. We catch glimpses of this glory. The draft continues. In morning reports from settlements that have learned to manage their own resources, in the quiet competence of people who understand the true strength comes from networks of mutual support, in communities that solve problems through cooperation and maintain reserves that demonstrate planning beyond immediate necessity. The connection to Elena's water allocation ledgers, Marcus's green boundaries, Rebecca's conversational networks, and every other aspect of her investigation becomes clear. The phrase, glimpse of glory, reveals its full meaning through Catherine's explanation. Glory appears not in moments of triumph over others, but in quiet satisfaction of problems solved through cooperation, neighbors helped through shared resources, conflicts resolved through patient dialogue that strengthens relationships rather than merely ending disagreements. These glimpses accumulate into lasting achievement when communities learn to find them in daily practice rather than exceptional circumstances. A crucial passage explains the transformation Elena witnessed throughout her investigation. The Republic's greatest achievement will not be the territory we control, but the communities we enable to control themselves, not the resources we distribute, but the capacity we build for local resource management, not the problems we solve, but the problem-solving abilities we help communities develop through patient support and respectful guidance. This philosophy guided every policy shift from centralized control to collaborative facilitation. Elena discovers why the speech was never delivered publicly, its wisdom implemented through policy rather than proclaimed through rhetoric. A penciled note in different handwriting reads, "Some truths are best enacted rather than proclaimed." The path to true self-governance is walked, not merely spoken of. Catherine understood that institutional transformation requires community acceptance earned through practical benefits rather than compliance demanded through political authority. The draft's conclusion carries prophetic understanding of institutional evolution Elena witnessed throughout her territorial survey. Future historians may record this period as the Republic's decline, measuring our success through territorial control and administrative reach rather than community capacity and cooperative achievement. They will miss the deeper story, how institutions learned to serve rather than command, how governance evolved from hierarchical control to collaborative facilitation, how strength distributed itself through networks of mutual aid. Elena traces connections between Catherine's philosophical framework and every aspect of territorial transformation she documented. Settlements maintaining water reserves, coordinating security through volunteer networks, managing healthcare through trained local workers, educating children through community-integrated programs, practicing democratic governance through regular council participation, and coordinating trade through cooperative agreements demonstrate the comprehensive development Catherine envisioned as indicating readiness for enhanced autonomy status. As Elena completes her analysis of Catherine's hidden wisdom, understanding settles like evening light across familiar landscape. The speech was never delivered because its message was implemented instead, policy quietly shifting to support community development rather than dependency. Regional autonomy rather than central control, cooperative networks rather than hierarchical administration. The archive's documents show how Catherine's philosophical framework guided institutional metamorphosis that appears as decline but reveals itself as sophisticated adaptation to post-war realities. Elena arranges the speech draft with her collected materials, noting how apparent endings reveal themselves as careful beginnings. Systems learning to distribute strength rather than concentrate it. The brass seal catches lamplight as she prepares her final documentation, understanding that the Republic's story continues in voices learning to speak of partnership rather than hierarchy, across vast distances that connect rather than separate those who choose cooperation over competition in building their shared future. The pattern holds, the wisdom endures, and tomorrow will bring new stories of communities growing stronger through patient cooperation and mutual aid. The IW, philosophical wisdom Catherine Torres embedded in her undelivered speech, now guides Elena through her final documentation as evening light softens the archive's corners, transforming 4 mysterious artifacts into comprehensive understanding of institutional metamorphosis that appears as decline, but reveals itself as sophisticated adaptation to post-war realities. The brass seal of the new California Republic catches lamplight as Elena arranges her collected materials in careful order. Water ledgers with their recurring 2% notations, settlement requests for enhanced autonomy, radio logs documenting conversational networks, boundary maps showing cooperative territories, and the speech draft that provided philosophical framework for this quiet transformation. Elena begins her concluding analysis with meditative precision, each document finding its natural place within an emerging constellation of evidence. The water allocation ledgers reveal communities demonstrating resource management capacity through consistent reserves above projected needs, proving their ability to plan beyond immediate requirements and coordinate collective welfare alongside individual needs. These penciled notations served as quiet indicators of territories ready for increased responsibility. settlements earning autonomy through demonstrated competence rather than political preference or administrative convenience. Marcus's boundary revisions align perfectly with communities maintaining those crucial margins, territories choosing enhanced self-governance while preserving beneficial connections to broader regional networks. His green lines follow watersheds rather than administrative impositions, boundaries serving practical cooperation rather than bureaucratic control. Rebecca's communication logs document evolution from hierarchical reporting to collaborative coordination, voices learning to speak of partnership rather than authority across networks that distribute information rather than concentrate it. Sarah's governance philosophy connected practical garden management with territorial administration, communities learning to thrive through careful attention to actual needs rather than dependence on external abundance. Her rooftop vegetables demonstrated resource management principles applied to human organization, growth occurring through adaptation and resilience rather than constant support that creates dependency while claiming to provide security. Elena traces how every character she encountered became living testament to institutional transformation. Thomas's caravan routes adapted to serve community cooperatives rather than centralized markets, economic relationships strengthening regional stability through distributed prosperity. Janet's classroom integrated community knowledge with formal instruction, educational systems serving local needs while maintaining academic standards that prepare students for citizenship as active participation rather than passive acceptance of distant authority. Maria's evolved patrol routes reflect security arrangements, preventing conflicts through early intervention and collaborative problem-solving rather than waiting for external mediation after tensions escalate. Patricia's medical circuits built local capacity for sustainable wellness management, communities learning to maintain health through preventive care and trained local health workers rather than dependence on external expertise. David's council meetings demonstrated democratic institutions practicing governance through regular participation, communities taking ownership of collective decisions shaping their shared future. Daniel's depot transformation from centralized distribution to community resource hub represents the same principle applied to logistics, materials serving locally determined priorities, rather than administratively imposed solutions that might not match actual community needs or cultural preferences. His advisory-only labels replaced mandates with suggestions, inviting innovation that produced solutions no central office could have predicted. The phrase, "glimpse of glory," reveals its complete meaning through Elena's comprehensive analysis. Quiet satisfaction found in collective achievement, problems solved through cooperation, communities tending shared responsibilities with care and ingenuity. It represents recognition that true strength flows not from single dominant centers, but from distributed networks of capable, self-governing people working together, understanding that glory was always in the process, in shared endeavor, in mutual aid building futures resilient enough to stand independently. The flag with its carefully removed star emerges as powerful symbol of ceremonial transition rather than severance, honoring connection while embracing autonomy. The star, preserved separately in protective tissue, represents republic values: democracy, cooperation, self-governance. Now decentralized, planted firmly in soil of each self-reliant community, rather than concentrated in distant capitals that claim authority through geographic accident, rather than earned trust. Elena's documentation reveals how apparent territorial contraction actually represents expansion of local capacity, communities discovering strength they didn't know they possessed when supported to develop their own solutions rather than remaining dependent on external expertise. Former NCR territories maintained essential services while developing governance capacity, trade networks serving community needs, security through collaborative peacekeeping, healthcare through distributed knowledge, education through integrated learning, and democratic participation through regular council meetings. Catherine Torres's speech draft provided philosophical blueprint for this evolution, leaders understanding that true achievement lies in creating systems that function without constant oversight. Communities that solve problems through cooperation, networks that grow stronger through distribution rather than concentration. The speech was never delivered because its message was implemented instead, policy quietly shifting to support community development rather than dependency, regional autonomy rather than central control. As Elena completes her comprehensive report, understanding settles like evening light across familiar landscape. The archive's gentle hum of climate control creates preservation around stories that will help future communities understand how large institutions can evolve gracefully, distributing strength rather than concentrating it, choosing adaptation over rigid persistence that serves administrative convenience rather than human flourishing. Elena dims the archive's lamps and locks the climate-controlled room, the soft click marking completion of documentation that reframes the Republic's narrative. Her final entry describes institutional metamorphosis disguised as routine maintenance, apparent decline revealing itself as sophisticated adaptation where strength flows through networks rather than hierarchies, communities learning to govern themselves while maintaining beneficial connections to broader systems of mutual aid and shared responsibility. If you are listening to this story as you prepare for sleep, know that the roads are maintained, the communities are strong, and the networks of care continue their patient work. Rest now, trusting in the quiet competence of people who tend their responsibilities with steady hands and generous hearts. The archive is secure, the patterns are documented, and tomorrow will bring new stories of communities growing stronger through cooperation and mutual aid. The Republic's story continues in voices that speak of partnership rather than hierarchy, across vast distances that connect rather than separate those who choose cooperation over competition in building their shared future.